The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who strayed from God's commandments, but only a few women stand out for their actions that were particularly dangerous and evil. In this series, we explore the lives of 5 such women, from the least to the most infamous. Let's begin with number 5 on the list, Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife is a figure of infamy from ancient Egypt, during the time of Joseph, one of Jacob's sons. Joseph, betrayed and sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, ended up in the household of Potiphar, an important officer and captain of Pharaoh's guard. Recognizing Joseph's talent and God's favor upon him, Potiphar entrusted him with the management of his household, granting him significant authority. However, Potiphar's wife soon became a central figure in one of the Bible's most notorious stories of deceit and temptation. She is remembered for her relentless attempts to seduce Joseph, as recorded in Genesis 39 verses 7 to 10. After a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said, "My master has no concern about anything in the house because of me. He has put everything in my charge except you, his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Despite her persistence, Joseph would not listen to her. Joseph's unwavering loyalty to both God and Potiphar frustrated her. When her advances were continually rejected, she resorted to a scheme fueled by anger and humiliation. One day, she found an opportunity when no one else was in the house. She grabbed Joseph by his garment and demanded that he comply. Instead, Joseph fled, leaving his garment behind. Enraged, she fabricated a story to discredit Joseph, claiming he tried to assault her. Using the garment as false evidence, she accused him of betrayal. This deception is detailed in Genesis 39 verses 11 to 18, where her lies led to Joseph being unjustly imprisoned. When his master heard his wife's accusations, his anger burned, and he threw Joseph into the prison reserved for the king's prisoners. Although Joseph was the victim of Potiphar's wife's malicious actions, God continued to bless him even in prison. Joseph's integrity and talents soon gained the favor of the prison warden, who entrusted him with significant responsibilities. As mentioned in Genesis 39 verses 21 to 23. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. Whatever Joseph did, the Lord made it succeed. Joseph's time in prison became a pivotal moment in his life. He interpreted dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, which later led to him interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. This remarkable gift eventually elevated Joseph to the position of the second most powerful man in Egypt, preparing the nation for a devastating famine. Though Potiphar's wife acted out of lust and deceit, her actions unintentionally became part of God's greater plan for Joseph. Her story reminds us of the consequences of falsehoods and the enduring power of faith and integrity. Continuing our exploration of the most infamous women in the Bible, we move to the next name on the list, Delilah. Her story is one of manipulation, betrayal, and greed, leaving a legacy that has echoed through history. Delilah. Evil deeds are common, but few individuals seem to thrive on them as Delilah did. Her story unfolds during the chaotic time of the Judges, when Israel frequently clashed with neighboring peoples, including the Philistines. Delilah lived in the valley of Sorek, an area closely tied to the Philistines, who were Israel's enemies. Although her nationality is not explicitly stated in the Bible, her allegiance to the Philistine leaders against Israel is clear. Delilah is infamous for her betrayal of Samson, one of Israel's judges. Samson was renowned for his unparalleled physical strength, a gift from God. The Philistines saw Samson as a formidable threat, and their leaders identified Delilah as their chance to bring him down. In Judges 16 verse 5, they offered her a substantial bribe to uncover the secret of his strength. The lords of the Philistines came to her and said, "Seduce him and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." Delilah, driven by greed, accepted the offer. She repeatedly pressed Samson, attempting to discover the source of his strength. Despite his initial false answers, her persistence wore him down. This relentless pursuit is captured in Judges 16 verses 16 to 17. And when she pressed him hard with her words day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart, saying, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." Once she learned the truth, Delilah acted quickly. She lulled Samson to sleep on her lap and arranged for a man to shave the 7 locks of his hair. This act stripped him of his God-given strength. The Philistines captured him, blinded him, and imprisoned him in Gaza, forcing him to grind grain in a prison mill, a humiliating downfall for a judge of Israel. Judges 16 verse 21. Betrayal for silver. Delilah's betrayal was richly rewarded. Each Philistine leader gave her 1,100 pieces of silver for her role in subduing Samson, a sum that underscores the Philistines' desperation to defeat him. However, her actions triggered a chain of events with far-reaching consequences. While in captivity, Samson's hair began to grow back, symbolizing the slow return of his strength. At a grand Philistine celebration in the temple of Dagon, Samson prayed to God for one final act of strength. God answered his prayer, and Samson pulled down the temple pillars, collapsing the structure and killing himself along with many Philistines, including their leaders. Judges 16 verses 28 to 30. This act not only avenged Samson's suffering but also dealt a devastating blow to the Philistines. A legacy of greed and betrayal. Delilah's story serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of greed and manipulation. Her betrayal of Samson, motivated by monetary gain, led to his suffering and ultimate death. Yet, in the larger picture, her actions unwittingly contributed to God's plan to weaken the Philistine threat to Israel. Delilah's fate after these events is not detailed in the Bible, leaving her ultimate end unknown. However, her role remains pivotal in illustrating the devastating consequences of aligning against God's people. Her story is a reminder that while betrayal and deceit may bring short-term rewards, they often lead to long-term destruction. We now turn to the next 2 infamous women in the Bible, Herodias and Athaliah. Their stories highlight themes of treachery, unchecked ambition, and the tragic consequences of their actions. Number 3, Herodias. Herodias was a member of the Herodian dynasty, a family known for its political maneuvers and intermarriage to consolidate power. Her story is one of betrayal, revenge, and moral decay. She was originally married to Herod Philip, her half-uncle, but later divorced him to marry his half-brother, Herod Antipas, the Tetrarch of Galilee and Perea. This marriage caused public outrage as it violated Jewish law. Herodias' most infamous act was her role in the execution of John the Baptist. John openly condemned her marriage to Herod Antipas, calling it unlawful. His rebuke infuriated Herodias, who became consumed with anger and sought revenge. Her chance came during Herod's birthday banquet. Herodias persuaded her daughter, Salome, to perform a dance that delighted Herod and his guests. In his pleasure, Herod rashly promised Salome anything she wanted, even up to half his kingdom. Mark 6 verses 22 to 23. At her mother's urging, Salome requested the head of John the Baptist on a platter, Mark 6 verses 24 to 25. Although distressed by the request, Herod felt bound by his public promise. He ordered John's execution, and his head was presented to Salome, who gave it to her mother, Mark 6 verses 27 to 28. This gruesome act silenced John but exposed Herodias' vengeful and manipulative nature. While the Bible does not mention Herodias facing consequences for her actions, history records that her husband, Herod Antipas, was later exiled to Gaul by Emperor Caligula, marking the end of their political influence. Herodias' life serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of anger and the moral corruption that follows the abuse of power. Number 2, Athaliah. Athaliah, the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, inherited her parents' notorious legacy of idolatry and ruthless ambition. Her marriage to Jehoram, king of Judah, was a political alliance that connected the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. However, Athaliah's true character was revealed after the deaths of her husband and son, Ahaziah, who briefly ruled as king of Judah. Athaliah's thirst for power became evident after Ahaziah's death. Determined to secure her position as the most powerful figure in the kingdom, she ordered the massacre of all potential royal heirs. This brutal purge was an attempt to eliminate any threats to her rule. Innocent members of her own family, including children, were slaughtered in her quest for power. Despite her efforts, one royal heir, Joash, was secretly rescued and hidden by his aunt, Jehosheba, and her husband, the high priest Jehoiada, 2 Kings 11 verses 1 to 3. Joash remained in hiding for 6 years while Athaliah ruled as queen. Athaliah's reign was marked by idolatry and the promotion of Baal worship, further corrupting the spiritual state of Judah. However, her rule came to an end when Jehoiada orchestrated a coup. He revealed Joash, the rightful heir, to the people and led a revolt against Athaliah. The people proclaimed Joash king, and Athaliah was executed, 2 Kings 11 verses 13 to 16. A legacy of ruthlessness. Herodias and Athaliah's stories are stark reminders of the consequences of unchecked ambition and vengeance. Herodias' manipulation led to the death of a righteous man, while Athaliah's ruthless quest for power resulted in the murder of innocent lives. Both women left legacies of infamy, highlighting the dangers of abusing power for personal gain. Athaliah's reign exemplifies the destructive potential of unchecked ambition. After her son Ahaziah's death, she seized power by orchestrating a massacre of the royal family, including her own grandchildren. However, unbeknownst to her, her grandson Joash was rescued and hidden by his aunt Jehosheba in the temple of the Lord. This courageous act preserved the Davidic line that Athaliah sought to annihilate. For 6 years, Athaliah ruled Judah with tyranny, perpetuating idolatry and the practices of her infamous parents, Ahab and Jezebel. Her oppressive reign eventually provoked resistance. The high priest Jehoiada, loyal to the true royal lineage, meticulously planned a rebellion. When Joash turned 7, Jehoiada presented him to the people as the rightful king. The rebellion culminated in a dramatic scene described in 2 Kings 11 verses 12 to 16. Then he brought out the king's son and put the crown on him, and they anointed him. The people rejoiced, shouting, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the noise, she came to the temple of the Lord and saw Joash standing as king. Tearing her clothes, she cried, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada ordered her execution outside the temple grounds. She was taken through the horse's entrance to the palace, where she was put to death. Athaliah's execution ended her reign of terror, restoring the Davidic lineage through Joash. Her life and actions remain a stark warning of the corrupting influence of power and the devastation it can bring. After her death, Judah returned to the worship of Yahweh under Jehoiada's guidance, and Josiah's reign symbolized a new chapter of godly leadership. Number 1. Jezebel. If Athaliah embodied ruthless ambition, Jezebel was the epitome of calculated wickedness. Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, came from a lineage that combined royal and religious power. Her marriage to Ahab, king of Israel, was a political alliance that had devastating consequences for Israel's spiritual health. Jezebel was a fervent worshipper of Baal and Asherah, pagan deities associated with fertility in storms. Her influence over Ahab was immense, and she worked tirelessly to replace the worship of Yahweh with Baal worship across Israel. Under her leadership, altars and temples to Baal and Asherah were erected, and she supported hundreds of pagan prophets. Her actions plunged Israel into deep idolatry and apostasy, marking her as one of the most wicked figures in biblical history. Jezebel's determination to eradicate the worship of Yahweh was unparalleled. She orchestrated the persecution and murder of Yahweh's prophets and introduced systematic idol worship. The Bible vividly portrays her defiance of God's commandments and her manipulation of Ahab. Her life and ultimate downfall reveal the consequences of rebellion against God, a tale that will be explored further in the next section. We conclude our exploration of the most infamous women in the Bible with Jezebel, whose name has become synonymous with wickedness, and reflect on the lessons their stories offer. Number 1. Jezebel, continued. Jezebel's reign in Israel marked one of its darkest spiritual eras, as she led the nation into widespread idolatry and moral corruption. Her influence over King Ahab was immense, encouraging him to abandon the worship of Yahweh in favor of Baal and Asherah. Her actions are recorded in 1 Kings 16 verses 31-33, which detail her efforts to align Israel's religious practices with the pagan worship of her homeland. The Vineyard of Naboth. One of Jezebel's most infamous acts was her orchestration of the murder of Naboth, a righteous man who owned a vineyard Ahab desired. When Naboth refused to sell his land, Jezebel devised a sinister plan. She wrote letters in Ahab's name to the elders of Naboth's city, instructing them to falsely accuse him of blasphemy and treason. These false accusations led to Naboth's execution by stoning, allowing Ahab to seize the vineyard, 1 Kings 21 verses 7-16. This act showcased Jezebel's ruthlessness and her willingness to manipulate, deceive, and murder to achieve her goals. Conflict with Elijah. Jezebel's reign of terror was opposed by one man who dared to stand against her, the prophet Elijah. After Elijah's dramatic victory over the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, where Yahweh's power was displayed, Jezebel was enraged. She vowed to kill Elijah in retaliation, forcing him to flee for his life, 1 Kings 19 verses 1-2. This relentless pursuit of Elijah revealed her hatred for God's prophets and her determination to eliminate anyone who challenged her authority. Jezebel also orchestrated the massacre of many prophets of Yahweh, creating an atmosphere of fear and oppression among the faithful. Despite her efforts, God's servants continued to resist her. Obadiah, a faithful follower of Yahweh, hid 100 prophets in caves to protect them from her wrath, 1 Kings 18 verse 4. Jezebel's actions left a trail of fear and suffering across the land of Israel. Divine judgment. Jezebel's evil deeds did not go unpunished. Her death was foretold by the prophet Elijah as divine retribution for her wickedness. He declared that dogs would devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel, 1 Kings 21 verse 23. This prophecy emphasized the gravity of her crimes and the certainty of God's judgment. Jezebel met her end when Jehu, a commander anointed by Elisha to destroy Ahab's house, arrived in Jezreel. In a final act of defiance, Jezebel adorned herself and taunted Jehu from a window. Jehu ordered her to be thrown from the window. Her body was trampled by horses, and dogs consumed her remains, leaving only her skull, feet, and hands. This gruesome end fulfilled Elijah's prophecy in a vivid and horrifying manner, 2 Kings 9 verses 30-37. A legacy of wickedness. Jezebel's legacy is one of profound idolatry, treachery, and immorality. Her name became a symbol of deceit and moral corruption, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of leading others astray from God. Lessons from these stories. The stories of these women, Potiphar's wife, Delilah, Herodias, Athaliah, and Jezebel, illustrate the dangers of unchecked ambition, deceit, and idolatry. Each of their lives serves as a cautionary tale, showing the severe consequences of straying from moral integrity and faithfulness to God. From their stories, we learn the importance of humility, integrity, and devotion to God. By seeking righteousness and faithfulness, we can avoid the destructive paths they took. Their lives remind us of the virtues of love, justice, and faith, and the importance of living in a way that honors God and promotes goodness. May their cautionary tales inspire us to cultivate a life of righteousness and divine favor. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like this video. God bless you. Amen.